I'm Michael Backman,
Hi, and I'm Paul Bromberg.
and we are going to have a conversation about collecting, because we are both collectors. We do other stuff as well. I have a gallery in central London. Paul lives in Thailand, in Bangkok, and has had a consulting business there. And but we've both been lifelong collectors, and I thought it'd be fun if we talked about our favourite objects and how we got them, and the stories, the anecdotes really, Paul, about these. So why don't you go first and you tell us about one object that you found and how on earth you got it and the struggle.
The struggle, well, not so much of a struggle, but okay, I'm going to recount first a silver water pot. Some people would call it a kettle, but it's not exactly a kettle. It is Chinese made, but for the Thai market, and it's a really beautiful example with an ebony handle, and it's been in my collection for about 10 years, maybe 12 years.
I'm going to ask you something.
Yes.
When you say Chinese made, do you mean it was made in China, or was it made by Chinese in Bangkok?
Well, this is the key issue. For many years, people in Bangkok would have looked at that water pot, and they would have said, oh, this is Shanghai silverware. It's a fine silver example. And they would have said, oh, it's made in China. But actually, it's very important to me because it has an inscription on it that it was made by a silversmith named Tan Yue He, and it was made for the 1889 exposition in Paris. And it has been etched on the bottom, the inscription's etched on the bottom. And if it was made in China, I don't believe it would have had that inscription on it, and it would have been clearly shown to be Chinese rather than Thai, made for the Thai pavilion at that exposition.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting point, isn't it? Like, there were a lot of ethnic Chinese people across Southeast Asia, and they came in various waves for various reasons, and they settled, and they became quite localized, and they made things, and some of them were silversmiths and goldsmiths and whatever, and so they would stamp the bases with their names or their brand names in Chinese, and then people read it and think, oh, it's made in China. And then today, it's almost, you'll probably disagree, but to me, it's almost a form of racism in some parts of Southeast Asia, where local, often ethnic Chinese people sort of say, oh, well, it couldn't have been made locally, it's too good, it must have been made in China. I find that really upsetting because I've in my own area of collecting, this happens quite a lot, where people assume anything with a Chinese mark must have come from China, and then you hear this thing, oh, it couldn't have been done locally, as if everything local was inferior.
Well, that certainly is true, and historically has been true, that people think that if it wasn't made in China, it must be inferior. But I think that is changing, actually, because what you're seeing is that within China itself, people are now much more accepting of Chinese export art and are starting to collect that of all types. So whether it's China trade paintings or whether it's export porcelain, and certainly with silverware, the name Tan Yue He is highly collectible.
Yeah, but that's something else there, because you're talking about Chinese export, but I'm talking about
this
Chinese
was made,
local.
Yeah, but this was made in Thailand.
Yes.
Because there's so much of it that has surfaced in Thailand.
Yeah.
It wasn't all exported from China.
But I think it's changing as well because of basically you and me, to be frank. Because we've both written books where we've explained that, in fact, I've done a book on Malay silver and gold, you've done your book on Thai silver. And we do explain that a lot of this stuff might look Chinese or might, but that doesn't mean it was made in China, that it's made locally.
But certainly the local Chinese collectors in China are now more accepting of these items that look Chinese but were made overseas.
Exactly, right.
And so they are starting to be collected. And there are certain brands, such as Tan Yue He, Huiyuan, Daxing, that are now becoming increasingly popular in China and collectible in China. So now the actual form of some of these things, are Chinese, but there are certain Thai traits to them, and certainly the type of water pot that I'm talking about here, which has kind of an animal's beak as its spout, and but very Chinese scenes on the body, is quite different from the kinds of water pots that were made in mainland China, but maybe quite similar to other water pots that you might have found in places like Singapore or Malaysia, made by ethnic Chinese silversmiths as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've got a dish actually, which is ostensibly Chinese, and until you see that on the feet, I think there are little star fruits known in Malay as blembing, but this is almost certainly Thai Chinese. And star fruits are indigenous to Southeast Asia, I think, and certainly were never seen in China. And so just this little detail gives it away that it must have been local Chinese in Southeast Asia and not Chinese in China who made it.
Well, anyway.
So just digressing.
Thank you,
I thought I'd add that in.
But so this particular water pot had an interesting background, obviously, because it was exported from Thailand and was part of the exposition at this, which is a trade show in 1889, and it has a French customs stamp on it, so clearly it was imported into France. And then, of course, 120 years, 130 years later, what happened to it in between? Well, we don't know exactly, but one of my friends, who's also a dealer, Simon Thomas, had been going to Latin America to source. He was a dealer in Chinese antiques. He'd been going there to source items, and he called me up one day and said, "Paul, I might have something that may be of interest to you." And I said, "Oh yes, what?" And he sent me some pictures, and it was this fantastic water pot which he'd found in a collection in Buenos Aires.
Wow, yeah. And it is fantastic. I must say, whenever I'm in your apartment in Bangkok, I'm very covetous of it.
Yes. So, well, thank you.
Sort of.
But it's, again, how fortunate and fortuitous that somebody who was living in Bangkok at that time as an antiques dealer, even though most of his business probably was in the UK or Europe at that time, was actually travelling to Latin America, and that he knew somebody that would know what that was, and also that he could tell that it might be of interest, and then he was on the spot, able to acquire it, bring it back, and of course I purchased it from him immediately.
And did he really slug you for it?
Of course, of course.
Yeah, he's a dealer.
Once he knew that I was interested. No, I think it was a very fair price, and of course he brought it back all the way from Buenos Aires to Bangkok.
Well, someone had to pay for his airfare.
Which is a long way.
How much was it, Paul?
I don't think we'll go into the details. It wasn't cheap, but I would like to say, and we've talked about this before. The values and what we can afford have changed significantly over our collecting lifetimes, and spending £200 or £300, 30 years ago would have seemed like a fortune to me.
Oh, hell yeah.
And now, I'm not saying I do it often, but spending a few £1,000s is achievable, and we're very fortunate that we're in that position.
We are. I mean, I can remember. I think both of us were probably the old thing of impoverished students and so on, and whatever we have now is what we've built ourselves, and which we can be quite proud of. But I remember, not that long ago, walking along with something. I think a glass thing I bought, and it was £300. And I could barely walk in the street with it. I was so worried I might break it. And now, goodness, it pales into insignificance compared to some of the stuff we get up to. But it is amazing how, your perception of values changes over time. But this is the normal life cycle, I suppose. As you get older, you should have more money.
And also, I think we've got to a stage in this economic cycle, if you can call it a cycle, where we probably both agree that keeping too much cash in the bank is not a healthy thing. So I'd I'd rather than just keeping cash in the bank, which you don't enjoy, I'd rather buy things for my apartment that I do enjoy every day, and I can look at and touch, and they're part of my life.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I mean, I love collecting. I of course have a gallery in London, but I came to this as a collector first. Yeah. And I think I was just sitting on all of this information because I was collecting, and I thought all this ever does is cost me money, it just piles up. And then I thought I could actually get a living out of this. It seems like a nice thing to do. I'd been trained as an economist, but and it was time to do something else. And so this is how this, the commercial aspect started. But I still collect, obviously, and the collecting informs the dealing because I have the knowledge because of my collecting. And some people might assume you keep all the best stuff for yourself, or maybe in some areas, but I don't collect very broadly. Just trying to think of an anecdote in response to yours, like one of my favourite things. I think just recently I bought a large pile of Malay beads. I love collecting Malay silver and gold. And the book I published last year that I'd written had just a few of these beads. They're quite rare, and they're made often with filigree and granulation work, and they're carefully soldered together, then they're gilded, made of silver. And I only had just a few examples for the book, and very few have been published. And then Sarah, who works with us in the gallery, I was away at the time, and I think she was bidding on something she wanted in an auction, in some regional auction in the UK. And I think the lot before the lot she wanted, she was just watching online. And then suddenly the lot came with all of these Malay beads, and she recognised what they were because she'd seen them in my book. And so she thought she'll take a punt and she'll buy them. And so thank God she did, because what she did was to buy probably the world's biggest collection of these beads anyone's ever seen. They would have been here in the UK for decades, and they probably came during the colonial times. And so I've now got them, and and I think, she's very clear. I think she paid about £800 for them, and I gave her £3,500. But that's good because she had a dental bill coming up. And I think quite often
you're here to help.
Well, I'm here to help. It's very. This is. I've basically sponsored people's funerals and things like that by buying things like this, and it's one way of getting cash moving around. But also what it means is now I have this fantastic collection of a very wide sample of these beads. Yeah. So I'm really pleased to have them.
Well, I can't say that I have your same altruistic streak, Michael, but I fell into collecting by chance as well, if you like. I'd always loved Asian art, and I really didn't know that much about it. I'd been collecting probably for about more than 10 years.
Well, you went to university in China, didn't you?
Yes.
And you spoke Chinese?
Yes.
Now, when was that, in the 70s?
No, in the 80s. I'm not that old.
80s.
I'm not that old.
Well, you could have been very, very precocious. So you were there in the 80s, but you grew up in London.
Yes.
And then you went to
I studied Chinese at Leeds
Were
University.
You a spy?
No, I was not.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Would you? I don't know if you'd tell us though.
I think this I wouldn't, but I'm not.
Confirms that you are actually.
And I studied as an undergraduate at Fudan University in Shanghai from 1982 to 1983, and then as a postgraduate at Xiamen University from 85 to 86. And I always loved Chinese art. Of course, I had no money whatsoever. And it was only really after I started working up for quite a long time, in the early, I would say, late 90s, early 2000s, that I really started collecting. And that was in Thailand, once I'd moved to Thailand. But what really accelerated my interest in collecting was, I guess I probably was bored with my work at the time, around about 2008, 2009, and I started doing research into the Benjerong porcelain that I was collecting, and I wanted to write an article about it because I wanted more people to know about that form of art. I got to know the people at Arts of Asia magazine, the Mark Brighter family, and subsequently, I became an editor at Arts of Asia and also the editor of the Journal of the Science Society. And so I became exposed to a lot more Asian art through editing articles on many different types of art. And I think that stimulated my interest further. And at the same time, of course, was then becoming more interested in attending auctions. I met you, of course, probably around about 2007.
Really?
I think.
It 2007,
I would have been around about then. It was...
Right.
It was... So, and I think you just opened your gallery at that time.
Right, probably, yes. It would have been about that time. Yeah.
So I think that all of that played into the collecting, to the desire to build collections and to acquire, very good pieces. And again, at the beginning, you just buy things you like, but later you realise that if you're going to be a serious collector, you should try to buy the best that you can afford.
Yeah.
Try to identify the best, first of all.
That's really true. That's really true. And often, I've got two types of clients for our gallery now, and half, I'd say, do exactly that. They build up a great collection of items. And the other half, what they do is to build up a collection of bargains. And it's kind of depressing when you see that. And, and for them, they're delighted by the fact that they might have got it cheap in an auction, or they managed to haggle a dealer down, smash the dealer right down to the floor, and then they think that was really good. And so then they build up a collection of, I suppose, of little victories over prices, but not necessarily a great collection of art.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, I try not to haggle too hard, because I do.
Yeah.
I like to haggle. Everyone likes a good bargain or a good deal.
Yeah.
But clearly, if there's something that you really want, then you have to be willing to go out for a limb. And on that note, I'll tell you about the second purchase that I made, which was really just last year in November 24. I was about to put my book on later Chinese bronzes for the Scholars Studio to bed.
Right, it's just been published.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, congratulations, Paul.
Thank you very much, Michael. Much appreciated. And there was one piece that came up at Sotheby's in London that I had my eye on, and it was a gilt bronze tortoise water dropper. And it was just a delightful object. And it really was, I could see it on the page, as it is now, opposite a bronze three-legged toad water dropper that was already in my collection. Also had a very good provenance. But they just absolutely complemented each other, and I could see that. And it's just such a fine example, and really a beautiful piece. And I thought, I really want and need to have this piece, not just for my collection, which of course was true, but also in the book. But this also was, had a nice backstory to it, this tortoise, because it came from quite a distinguished collection, I think out of San Francisco. And then it was acquired in New York in around about 2016, I think, at an auction by Ulrich Hausmann. And Ulrich Hausmann was a German scholar. I think he was an engineer by trade. He was kind of a Renaissance man, and really bright, from what I understand. I never met him, but I know several people that knew him quite well. And he had done research and wrote a couple of essays on later Chinese bronzes in the 80s. I think, 80s and 90s. Anyway, this tortoise was in his collection, and I persevered during the auction and was lucky enough to buy it. But I was quite fortunate in that I essentially paid half of what he'd paid less than 10 years before, because he bought at the height of the bubble. But again, he appreciated what it was, and he had the funds to be able to buy it.
Yeah, certainly. Having funds is very helpful. Although it can go the other way as well. Sometimes you can actually have too much money and you make bad decisions. When you have enough but not quite enough, it actually makes your buying more informed and you're more cautious, and you're less likely to make a mistake. So it's interesting. You can actually be too rich to be a collector sometimes.
Well, there are people that I've met who just buy in bulk because they do have lots of money, and they don't know really what they're buying.
Yeah, I heard a story of some Middle Eastern sheikh who was here in London and who liked to buy, but someone said to me, "Oh, you walk into a hotel room, where he's just simply sitting on a chair looking absolutely bored, and then there was like a succession of people bringing stuff through, and he'd just sort of like nod yes or no as to whether he would buy it." And you sort of think, where's the passion in that? Where's the intellectual content? Nothing. It's just an accumulation of other people's cleverness, certainly not his own.
And that is actually also true in terms of how to collect and how to acquire. You know, I've seen some very good lots at auction of 8 or 10 pieces of bronzes that I like. Maybe I like 2 or 3 pieces, but I basically early on said I'm not going to buy in bulk. I want to buy each piece. I want to inspect each piece carefully. Yeah. I want to try to do research if I have time into that piece and make a decision whether I want to buy one piece. It's not fulfilling if you end up buying 5 pieces and then you really want to get rid of 4 of them immediately because they don't really fit in with your collection.
And also, you don't. I mean, even if you bought 5 pieces that you do like, but you don't spend enough time looking at each piece because you've just got too much, and then they end up going on the stockpile of all of your other stuff, and you've never had the time to really treasure it and analyse it and appreciate it.
Well, I have to admit, I have done that one time. And again, it's quite an interesting story from my perspective, in that there was a sale at Sotheby's in 2017, and there was a bronze weight of a mythical beast with cubs on its back. It was kind of cute, and I really was interested in it, but I was just starting out. I hadn't really gained much experience, and it seemed, I think the estimate was £2,000 to £3,000, which for me at that time seemed like quite a lot. Yeah. And okay, I hadn't seen it in person, so I let it go. Subsequently, I met one of the Sotheby's people, and I inquired about the piece, and they checked with the owner because it didn't sell, and the owner couldn't find it, couldn't locate it. It was in storage somewhere. So I forgot about it. That piece, the owner apparently passed away, and that piece came up at auction in London early last year, but within a lot of 5. And again, so I decided I had to buy it. It worked out, I must say, much cheaper than at Sotheby's. But but I got the piece that I wanted. It's in my book. But unfortunately, the other 4 pieces, I've already sold 2 of them, and I will disperse the others in due course. Right. Yeah. Because they just don't fit in with my collection.
Yeah, I've got an auction type story for my book on Malay silver and gold. A piece came up at Bonham's, and I thought, oh God, I want that. That is absolutely very relevant to a very special chapter I was writing on gold filigree, where I'm arguing that this sort of filigree was being produced in Sumatra in the 18th century for the European market. And at the time, a lot of this sort of filigree was turning up in, when it did turn up, say in London, it would often be ascribed to like possibly a London goldsmith in the 18th century. And I was thinking, no, it was not European made. This is all Malay and from Sumatra. Anyway. So Bonham's in London had this box. It was a tortoiseshell box. I think it had come from Scotland, from an owner in Scotland. And it had these gold filigree mounts, which were specifically of this type that I was looking for from Sumatra. And I just saw it and I thought, I must get that box. And anyway, so the estimate, I think, was £5,000 to £7,000, so not small. But I thought I really need that because I need it to be published, and I just wanted to own it as well because it fitted in with the other filigree items that I have. Anyway, so the auction comes, and it just goes up and up and up. And I thought, oh, bugger, someone spotted this, I should also add that Bonham's had miscatalogued it. Not only had they described the gold as silver gilt, and I thought, well, if you know anything about this, it's not silver gilt, it is gold. And secondly, they said it was Indo-Portuguese, and I thought, well, that's wrong as well. It's actually, it's Indonesian, essentially, from Sumatra, and Dutch colonial. So that was annoying because I thought the Indo-Portuguese market is a lot higher generally than, say, the Dutch colonial. So the price could go really high. The collectors seem to be wealthier for Indo-Portuguese. Anyway, so it gets up to like about 8,000 and I'm still bidding. And then I decide that I think this is someone who I know who must be bidding against me. And I was so cross, but I also know that he's super rich and will stop at nothing to get something. And I thought, well, I'm going to punish him. I'm going to make him pay a hell of a lot for this. So really, the box is really worth probably 9,000 max. I bid it up to £20,000. And I thought, oh God, I've got to stop. This is ridiculous. I might actually get this, and I can't. There's way too. There's like way too much money for this, and so I stopped bidding. And then I thought, God, I hope there's another bid. And there was, and I thought, oh, thank God, I haven't got this. Thank God, thank God, thank God. I was cross because I wanted it, but then I was cross because I thought this other person's got it. I'm absolutely sure I knew who it was. But I thought at least I punished him, for bidding against me on this thing I really wanted. I thought he doesn't even need it. He's got so much stuff. This won't mean anything to him, but it's going to mean a lot to me. Anyway, so a couple of days go by, and I see the head of that department at Bonhams, and in fact, I think he came for lunch. And I said, oh, well, I know where that's gone, and I said where I thought it had gone, and I named the country where I thought the buyer was. And he said, oh, no, it's not going there. He said, no, it's I think he said somewhere in France or Italy or whatever. And he said, not only that, but we don't know this buyer. We don't understand his buying. He hasn't paid. And a few days later, he also went nuts on something else and paid far too much for some old master paintings. And he's not responding to emails. So it looks like he's not going to pay. And he said, so if you want to make an offer on that box, and this is the box I bid up to 20,000. He said, you're very welcome to, and I've been instructed by the seller, the consignee, to basically try and sell it. And so I was like, really? So I said, look, I bid it up to £20,000. I had no intention of paying that. It's not worth that. I couldn't possibly pay that. And I said, I hope you understand. And I explained, I said, look, I was being silly. I just forced up the price to punish someone who was bidding against me because I was angry. And this is so silly, and very dangerous. And then he said to me, well, make an offer. And so I said, look, I'd be prepared to pay. And I think I said 7,000 or whatever plus commission. And so he said, okay, fine. I'll relay that to the consignor and see what they say. And the answer came back, yes. And so I got it, bizarrely, for what I was wanting to pay for it, what I thought it was worth, after having bid it up to £20,000 plus commission. So it's just the weirdest thing that I ended up with it.
Auctions are strange. I think that's the...
Oh, very strange. And then the happy story is that it's in my book and it's one of my favourite pieces. But what a circuitous route to buy it. So we should do more podcasts on bizarre stories about how we've captured things. Anyway, I think this is probably enough for now. And so thanks, Paul. This is
no, thank you, Michael. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, we'll do it again soon.